if there was ever an empathetic developer brimming with passion and pride over a final product, Lars Overland is that developer. I've had the pleasure of knowing Lars now for a long time. He's the lead developer of DHIS2 platform. He's been that for almost 2 decades now, and he's been responsible for designing and implementing the DHIS2 software, as well as building up the development team that produces the DHIS2 standard releases. This session is actually now almost a permanent fixture in all of our DHIS2 symposium. And Lars will be going through the DHIS2 roadmap, looking at DHIS2 as a platform, the analytics, tracker, and Android modules of DHIS2, and most importantly, the exciting features coming up in the 237 release, and the long-term priorities for DHIS2. I think for those who are trying to understand the process, Lars will be also talking through the roadmap and how the university is trying to make that more transparent, and we'll be telling you more about the web page and how you can, I don't know whether influence is not too strong a word, but actually how you can have your voice heard in terms of feature requests. And so without any further delay, I welcome Lars Overland for his session on the DHIS2 roadmap. Thank you for joining us, Lars.
Yeah, thanks so much for the presentation, for the introduction, Bisoya. I really appreciate that one. Just checking, can you see my screen by now?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Bisoya. And as Bisoy said, it's time once again to talk about the DHIS2 roadmap for the next coming releases. And we have a lot of interesting things in store. Today we're going to cover the 237 release up until the 239. And as most of you know, 237 is due in a couple of weeks. So a lot of the things we're going to talk about are in fact done, and you can look forward to this coming out in a couple of weeks. We can enjoy the new features that we're bringing to you. So today we're going to go product by product. We're going to talk about the analytics, tracker, platform, and finally we're going to talk about the Android clients that we're providing. So we have a lot to cover, so we should just get started, and we're going to start with analytics. All right, so the main effort for the analytics team in the coming year is going to be the new event reports app. So as most of you know, we've had the old event reports app with us for a very long time. It's getting quite dated in terms of technology, in terms of look and feel, and also in terms of getting new features and improvements. And so building a completely new event reports app is going to be the main focus of the analytics team for the coming year. We will make it very similar to the data visual application so that you can basically reuse the knowledge that you have in the visualizer. The main focus is going to be on what we call tracked entity analytics, which relates also to what some call cross-program analytics. And the idea here is that to make it more focused on the individual, on people, and less focused on programs. We often hear that DHIS2 tracker in general is too focused on programs. People like to put the individual, the person, or the thing like a commodity or so on front and center, and then provide analysis around the individual, sort of independent of which program contains data for that individual. So we are providing very nice mockups now with our excellent UX designer, Joe. So we're going to have a look at some of the mockups that we have and that we're working to implement basically. So this looks very familiar from the visualizer application, but this is then obviously the new event reports. So on the left here, you will see that we will have input selection and dimension selection, and then at the top you will see that we have drag and drop dimensions, where you can drag your dimensions and put them into columns and filters like you used to from the visualizer application. So the first step is going to be to select your input, and the input can be events, it can be enrollments. This is what we have today. But now we're also going to be able to select tracked entity. And after that, you can select what type of tracked entity, in most cases, a person. And after doing that, you can move to your program dimensions and talk about and select the different programs that you would like to use. And the innovation here is that we're going to select from different programs and basically select attributes, data elements, dimensions from different programs, and then include that in the same analysis. We also have a bunch of other dimensions, like organic event status created by dynamic dimensions like categories and group sets like we have today. We also plan to make the time dimensions that you can see on the left, on the bottom left, more accessible and make it possible to easily drag and drop into the different types of timestamps that you provide for Tracker. All right, so we're also working hard on the visualizer application and adding lots of improvements to the different features that we have there today. One big feature that's coming out in 2.37 is the ability to freeze the column and row titles of a pivot table. So this is a request that many have provided. So we have actually made it possible now to freeze the titles for the columns of the row, so that if you have a very large pivot, you can then scroll down and you can still see the titles and understand what the data represents in terms of ordinates and data elements and so forth. So this is basically an option under style that you can now enable in the pivot in 2.37. Another very cool feature that we're adding is the ability to do drill down in the organizational dimension within charts and visualizations. So if you have a chart that contains the organite dimension, for instance, you have organization units on the columns, we can now drill down to the level below or go up from the current level. So again, this is something that many people ask for, to provide more interactivity, more dynamic behavior within the charts, and make it possible to kind of quickly drill down and up and explore the data without having to go to the left dimension and look for the organometry and so forth. Okay, and so let's move to the dashboard. We're adding a very cool feature now, which is basically the ability to set the dashboard layout. So we're going to support free flow, which is basically place whatever you want anywhere, which is pretty much what we have today. The new feature here is the ability to set fixed columns, so that you can have a layout of fixed columns on the pivot, on the dashboard. And then when you create dashboards, the items will automatically place themselves within those mentioned columns. And the nice thing here is that you can very quickly build nice looking dashboards then without having to do a lot of dragging and dropping to make the dashboard. So this is going to make it much faster to provide good looking dashboards with a very few clicks without having to do a lot of drag and drop. Okay, so moving on to a very interesting feature, which we think is going to be a small game changer. So in 2.37, which again is in a couple of weeks, we now made it possible to access your dashboards offline. And you don't even need to install an app. There's no separate app to install. There's nothing you have to do. In fact, it's the good old web application that we have enhanced with technologies and patterns referred to as progressive web applications. So that is not really a particular technology. It's rather a pattern and kind of a collection of technologies, which include things like making it faster to load, making it look more like a native application, supporting offline functionality through something called service workers, and making the whole thing look and feel more like a native application. So the nice thing here is that you can open the dashboard. You can then explicitly say which dashboards you would like to have offline. And then the application is going to sync data automatically with the backend and keep your data fresh, depending on last time you basically connected to the internet and to the server. They also made the entire dashboard rendering much more mobile optimized and mobile friendly, so that you can have charts which become sort of reactive and adapts to the width that you have available in your mobile device. So this means that you can then basically sync your favorite dashboards, take your phone or tablet to the field, even if connectivity is not there, and provide feedback sessions to community workers, facility assessments, and so forth. So this is a very exciting feature that we're looking forward to release in a few weeks. In terms of analytics, we also have some various features that we're coming out with over the next releases. We've added indicator type support for single value dashboard items, so that you can, for for indicators, which have, for instance, percentage, we're automatically going to add a percentage symbol to the dashboard. We're adding labels to axes for multi-axis charts so that you can understand more what the different axes mean. We're also working on continuous analytics update for enrollment data. Currently, we support events and aggregate data, as you know. We're also working on support for enrollment data to make tracker analytics more real-time and provide data reports faster to the users after data is been entered. Category options and indicator expressions is also coming. Right now, you can include category option combinations, but not options. And that can be quite useful when you have many categories that you would like to do subtotals like female only or under 1 year only and so forth. All right, so again, there's much more to come. We're touching on the highlights here. And now we're going to move over to the tracker side of the application. So the big thing that we have been working for quite some time now on Tracker is adding Tracker support to the existing Capture web application. So as you know, about 2 or 3 releases ago, we released a new Capture application for the web, which includes event programs. In 2.37, we're slowly rolling out support for Tracker programs also in Capture. We are in fact going to hide this behind the flag and going to do kind of an invite only in the first few months, so that we can kind of make sure we can find and fix the bulk of the issues that might be there. And then once we feel that we have a stable product, we're going to gradually release it to everyone so that everyone can benefit. So this, of course, comes with the new nice look and feel that we have in DHIS2. The main goals that we have for the new tracker are basically what we call a track entity-centric dashboard. Again, we don't want to segregate the data by program. We want to put the individual, the tracked entity or the individual person or thing front and center on the dashboard, and then provide whatever data is accessible and existing for that person on the dashboard directly. We're also working on things like improved duplication record handling, line listing data entry, organic tree filtering by program, better performance, both from a user experience and the API sort of usage perspective, and of course, a better user experience. So again, let's have a look at some of the mockups that we're working toward. This is in fact, again, mostly some of this is done. Some of this is still pending. So this is partly mockups, partly real UIs. So this is a mockup for the person dashboard. And as you can see, we have a nice profile there at the top with a photo, some basic information about the individual. And then we have a enrollment overview below there where we can basically show whatever enrollments are available for this particular person. So there's no need to go and hunt for data and try to find depending on the switch between the programs. You can see that all the data for this person is now accessible in the dashboard all together. Then if you enter into a particular enrollment, we have what we call the enrollment dashboard, where we have all the information about this enrollment in the same dashboard. So if you look closely at this mockup, you will see that we have a screen with all the stages, with all the events available. This is also then for every stage within the program in this particular enrollment. On the right, you will see a improved sidebar with program rule warnings, errors, feedback, and so forth. There's indicators and the profile information and so on and so on. So again, we're trying to make it easy to get a complete overview of all the data within this enrollment for this particular person. Duplication handling is another one. We have a new way of detecting duplicates in the system, which is more intelligent, better at finding duplicates, not just based on one property, but also looking at combination of properties, looking at what we call fuzzy matching to find, typos, misspellings, slight variations in spelling and so forth. And we do want to then display this type of dialogue where when you enroll someone, when you're looking at someone, we will then basically suggest possible duplicates, which you can then examine and see if this is a real duplicate or not. Okay, and in this case, we can see that there's multiple people that have a matching name, and then we can go in and basically do a manual merge if possible. We're going to work on both supporting complete manual merging and also automatic merging, where it's kind of reasonable from a system perspective to merge two different individuals. Yeah. Okay. Another big feature we're working on is what we call line listing data entry. So So this is basically the ability to have different types of events for the same stage in one screen, and then do data entry or updates for data directly in the list. So if you look at the red box there, you will see that in this case, we have a repeatable event, and then we have multiple data elements on the columns, and then we would like to make it possible now to basically change or add data directly in the table, what some people call line listing data entry, to do kind of efficient bulk changes to data without having to do a lot of clicks into a particular event, back again into the event, save it, blah, 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 so forth. So more effective sort of batch data entry is something that's high on the list. Yeah, and also we are of course also working on performance for Tracker. Tracker is increasingly being adopted for large-scale implementations now across the world. We see a lot of very large implementations with tens of millions of people and millions of people being registered in the system, especially around COVID-19, where many countries attempt to vaccinate their entire population. So we're working a lot on what they call the new Tracker data importer. We have a completely new API for import of data, which is significantly faster and more stable than the previous. We're also working on what we call the Tracker search engine, meaning the ability to find people, search for people, look up by unique identifier, and so forth. And in the backend, we're working on things like code efficiency, bottleneck removal. We're working on database query optimizations, database indexing, and also reducing database locks and contention within the database, for those who know what that is. We also think that the new Tracker application is more efficient in terms of API usage. And the most significant improvement we made was that instead of saving one value at a time, we basically now save the entire event also within Tracker. So this means that we don't send like a ton of requests to the server, but we batch everything into one event and send it to the server, which allows us to do a lot of optimizations in the backend and make things much more efficient and scalable. We also work on what they call client-side caching, meaning that the client is more sparse when it comes to using the API. We try to cache data more aggressively on the client and then kind of be softer on the API and the backend server. Okay, and this has made a lot of impact. We have also backported a lot of these improvements down to 234.4. And we can see from the field that the average response times in seconds have gone down dramatically after we have introduced some of these improvements. And again, we have backported some of these to the old Tracker importer and so on, and also to the Tracker search engine. So if you are on 234 or later, it's definitely worth upgrading to the latest patch release within that major branch, so that you can basically then benefit from all the performance fixes that we basically all the time backporting to existing releases. So again, we really recommend you to upgrade your instance to the latest patch all the time. To talk about some real numbers on the field and not just theoretical numbers, we also know that we have seen in Bangladesh, for instance, we have a very large immunization campaign going with more than 400,000 sites being sort of campaigned. There's 35 million vaccinations being provided. There's, I think, more than 3,000 Android devices in the field and so on. So very large implementation there for vaccination that now is humming along nicely using DHIS2 Tracker. You might have heard about the Sri Lanka effort for vaccination for COVID-19, where we had more than 60,000 people being entered into the system every day. And we have entered more than 60 million people, almost the entire population of Sri Lanka, into Tracker. Another very interesting use case now from Rwanda. Rwanda is making great progress in immunizing their entire population for COVID-19. And we now see that more than 100,000 people every day, sometimes up to 200,000 people every day, are being registered with their COVID-19 vaccine and their vaccine certificates using Tracker. And we can see that the system is performing quite nicely after we have been doing a number of improvements to the backend performance. So we are seeing real improvements in this in the field now and very large scale implementations. Improved deduplication is another big one. We're now working on fuzzy search and matching, as I mentioned. We're matching against a combination of attributes, not just on individual attributes. We're also working on having a background job for finding duplication, so that instead of doing things in real time, we can also have kind of an async background job that can work on finding duplication in the database and then suggesting that. When it comes to merging of duplicates, we have essentially two approaches. One of them is to suggest candidates for automatic merge. So the system will identify which candidates we have for automatic merging. And then for those cases where it's possible to do a sensible merge, we can then automatically do a merge based on a one-click operation to merge the two different individuals. And we know that duplication is a big problem in some of these countries for providing longitudinal care and avoiding to create new records all the time. So this is definitely high on the list for the developer team. All right, so shifting gears a bit, and we're going to talk now from a platform perspective. And as you will see, platform covers many things, from data quality to MFL to data approval. We have a huge portfolio of apps and tasks. And we're going to start by talking about the new data approval app that's coming out in 2.37. So in 2.37, we have a very nice new web app for data approval. The old application was getting quite old and very out of date, and it was definitely time to build a new one. And so the new data approval app, of course, has a new nice look and feel that we have now for all the DHIS2 apps. Most importantly, we also have incorporated what we call parallel data approval workflows. So we have had in the backend a new entity called data approval workflows for quite some time, which allows us to have multiple workflows targeting particular levels and particular period types for approval in the system. And this data model allows you to basically approve many data sets and many periods at the same time. So you can group data sets into one data approval workflow. You can target multiple levels, and you can also then have, for instance, quarterly or yearly, even if the data set itself is monthly. So we can have a longer frequency for the approval workflow. It also makes it much easier to view the approval status of subunits in the hierarchy, where you can just go straight to the hierarchy, the origin tree, and see the status immediately without having to click on everything. So let's have a look of the user experience for this one. So we're going to start by choosing a workflow. And here we have the workflows that we have set up in the system. And then we can then pick the workflow we need. We can choose a week. In this case, it's weekly. And then we go to the origin hierarchy. And if you look closely here, you can see that we have different states for approval. So there's ready for approval, approved, waiting for lower level approval. And we can immediately see the status for approval directly from the origin tree without having to go and click on every origin to see the status. So this is going to be a lot more efficient. As I mentioned, you can also have multiple data sets in one workflow. So once you made your selections, we can then browse the 3 data sets which are part of this particular workflow. And then we can quickly see the data by data sets to understand what exactly it is that we are approving. And if you look at the bottom, you will see that there's an approve button where we can click. And once you do that, you get this approval screen where you confirm which data sets that you are approving. And finally, you then approve the data. So again, much better user experience compared to what we had previously. Okay, the other main focus, or let's say the biggest focus for 2.38 is going to be a new implementation of the aggregate data entry app. This has been, the existing data entry app has been with us for a very long time, almost 15 years now. And I'm sure there's been countless of hours of use from data entry clerks and district managers and so forth around the world. And it's definitely our time now to build a new data application that we can re-implement using the new technology stack based on React, the new user experience, so on. We are not going to make radical changes because we know that this app has a very large user base and people are fairly happy with how it's used today. But we will make a number of incremental improvements. So one of them is what we call always visible data sets and period selection, so that you can always see which data set and period that you have selected. Improved and prominent data validation is another one. So we have then the option of then showing the data validation rules, the data validation violations more proactively to the user. So instead of having to go and click and look for data validation problems, you can go straight and you can get those displayed to you. We also would like to make it easier to filter by data sets, also working on better offline support. So super quick look on the prototype. So you can see here that we have the always accessible selection at the top there. You can look at the red arrow. And then you can see that on the right side, we have a new bar for data validation violation. So we're going to be much more proactive of showing the data validation violations to the user to basically make it much more sort of notable, much more easy to see what type of problems you have in your data sets. And that way, we hope to improve data quality by catching some of these issues through the validation rules. Okay. Moving on, a lot to cover in this session. We have also on the platform team, the main priority for, let's say, 239, 240 is a new version and implementation of the maintenance app. So we're working on things like faster load time, less bandwidth usage when you load the app. We're working on better search and filtering. We're working on the ability to edit fields in list view without having to go into each and every object. Bulk sharing and also bulk operations for updates, delete, and download. We know that people say sharing is a bit cumbersome right now because you have to go object by object. We would like to make it possible to add, users and user groups to many objects in one go. So again, let's have a look at the mockups. You can see here that we have a new style for the menu to the left with kind of vertical tabs, vertical sort of accordion menus on the left that can be collapsed and opened. We will add support for bulk operations so that you can select multiple data elements and then do, for instance, a delete, or you can download and so on in one go without having to go object by object. The add new screen is going to be much more user-friendly. We're moving away from those kind of plain lines under the field to kind of regular data fields again, which we think is more intuitive to use. And as you can see here, we have a better sidebar that we talked about. We have a better overview of which types of objects are available. And then for things like tracker program, we're going to work on having a vertical sort of stepper vertical tab menu on the left. You can easily switch between enrollment, option stages, access, and so on within your left bar there. You can also see that you have a persistent bottom bar there with information for going to the next, to the previous, to save, exit without staging, and so on, which is always going to be visible. So there's no need to do a lot of scrolling down to the bottom of the form in order to save the program. Okay. Moving on, MFL, also known as Facility Registry or Organite Registry, is another hot topic for DHIS2 and something we spend a lot of time on. So one thing that we're coming out with in 237 is the ability to have configurable profiles for an Organite. So this is a common feature of many of these MFL systems out there, that you can basically define a profile for the Organite and then show different types of information for a particular Organite, including static information, semi-permanent information, and also regular data for the Organite. So we're going to make it possible to display information such as an image of the Organite or facility, of course, name, description, opening date, and all those fixed pieces of information. The location is obvious, longitude, latitude, or geometry, depending on the type. We're going to make it possible to include specific metadata attributes to include in the profile, Organite groups, and also aggregate data. So we can then, based on a period, we can then show particular indicators, data elements to include in the profile. This is going to be implemented in maps first, and then later in the visualizer application. So let's have a look at one of the mockups that we have. Again, this is coming in 237. We believe it's going to be quite useful for the MFL use case. So on the right here, this is then obviously our new offices in Oslo. Typically not Sierra Leone health facility, but just to demonstrate how this works. So here you can see that we have an image. We have different types of information. We're also going to make it possible to kind of show dynamic information based on data and so on. This is going to be accessible from a new Organite layer that we're adding and a new MFL layer that we're adding to the Maps application that makes it easy to just show facilities, click on them to get more information. So we're basically going to strip down the GIS application a little bit and make it easy to provide the type of MFL experience that many people want, which is very often simpler than the more advanced GIS thematic mapping operations that we see. Yeah, so various things we have on the roadmap. I'm going to be quick on this one. We're working on something called Organite indicators, which is the ability to return counts of Organites, such as facilities, based on criteria for data. So one example there would be, show me all the facilities with more than 20 beds, or show me all the facilities that has power and running water, and show me facilities which meet certain criteria for waiting time and so on and so on, and then return those as indicators, which can then be used as everything else in the visualization apps, also to be combined with other types of aggregate indicators. Ability to propose and approve ordinates in the workflow is coming. So we can basically within the system have someone propose an ordinate and then a simple workflow for basically approving that ordinate before it makes it into the system as a regular ordinate or facility in the system. And we think this is going to be quite useful for the MFL aspect of DHIS2. Another one for MFL is what we call ordinate split and merge. This is coming on the API level in 237, and we're going to provide a UI later. So this is basically ability to split, let's say, a district into multiple districts, or merge a district, many districts into one district. And this will also take care of things like references to other metadata, how to merge aggregate data, how to merge tracker data, and so on. For data quality, we're coming out with a new algorithm for outlier detection called modified set score, which is we think is an enhancement over the set score that we do support today in the data quality app. Data integrity checks are much faster now. We pushed everything down to the database, so they are now an order of magnitude faster than they used to be in 236. We also made a lot of work in the translations, so we believe that the entire data model is now translatable, so you can do database translations of a lot of the UI and the user-facing apps. Yeah, security is another big one. We can talk a long time about this. I'm just going to mention some highlights. We have a dedicated security engineer now in the DHIS2 team. We're also in the process of hiring a security lead within the core team. And some of the highlights we're working on from a technical perspective is what they call personal access keys, or also referred to as token-based authentication. So you can basically have an personal API key that we can use to authenticate with the API. Cascading sharing for dashboards is also coming in 237. So we can essentially then share not just the dashboard, but also underlying objects within the dashboard, like data elements and like maps and visualizations and so on. We think this is going to improve security, because today people are just giving everything public access because it's too complicated to make the sharing within the dashboard appropriate. Max ordinate level restriction is interesting. We're going to make it possible for a user to define how far down in the hierarchy you can go to look at data. So one example here is that for a public-facing dashboard or portal, you can now make it so that a user cannot go below the district level and look at the facility data, but just go down to the district and look at the aggregated data there. We're redoing a little bit of the two-factor authentication support that we have in DHIS2. We believe this is quite important, especially for system administrators, that we enable this. Yeah, and then JWT, JSON Web Tokens, is another security standard that we're working on. This is basically this is a API token that is suitable for use by web clients, which provides better security than the cookie-based authentication that we use today. All right, so last section for today, we're going to talk about the Android application. And Android has seen a lot of growth lately. It's now used in a lot of implementations, and we can see that an increasing number of implementations now are using Android. So we have seen, for instance, in Bangladesh, we have this large immunization campaign where there's more than 8,000 devices in the fields. Ghana, we have a large implementation with more than 3,000 devices. Same with Nigeria, more than 3,000 devices in the field. And as you have seen, performance, stability, and security have been a top priority for us. The team is working 25% of the time on performance, security, refactoring, about 25% on bug fixing. And we're really taking the performance seriously. We have seen on the metrics now that there's a lot less crashes for the app. And we're also now seeing that the backend is performing better. The app is using the API in a better way. And so we feel like we're really on track for making the Android applications a more robust, stable application that we can use at scale, essentially. So the big thing that we're working on now, and which is somewhat done for the next version of Android, which is 2.4, I think, is essentially offline analytics. And this has been a top request from the field. So as you know, in many cases, in many situations, the end user would basically be offline, like a community health worker traveling around, or someone traveling out to do like a facility assessment. And so the ability to do analytics offline on the device has been a top priority. And this is coming partly in the next version, but also gradually more in the coming versions, where we have added support for what we call mobile compatible analytical objects. So what does that mean? That means that you can basically use the same visualizations that you use on the web, on the server, also on Android. With mobile compatible, we mean that we don't support, of course, everything that we can do on the web on Android, but we can do a subset of what we can do on the web on the Android device. So things like pivot tables, single values, column charts, line, radar, pie, and so on. Pivot tables with one row and two columns, we can now display on the mobile application. And again, data here is actually aggregated on the device. So that means data that's being captured on the phone, you can now utilize in those visualizations and do aggregation on the device. So we implemented a new aggregation engine just for Android that you can use to calculate and make statistics based on the data that you have on your device, even without any connection to the backend server. The Android settings application have been improved and revamped and now has a lot of options for this. Basically here you can have admins set up visualizations to be displayed and linked to programs. You can link visualizations to data sets and even to the home screen of the application. So you can, when you open the app, you can directly see visualizations directly on the home page. So let's have a look at some of those visualizations. Here we can see that we have indicators on the left with things like infant weight. So we can have like a weight curve and graph on the phone. We have simple pivot tables with columns and rows, visualizations, and again, the table with the corresponding data below. And again, this is displayed directly on the mobile device. We also added the ability to filter and do drill down within the chart, so that we can come to a particular chart and then change the visualization to become a line or bar or pie. We can drill down in the period. We can drill down with the ordinate. We can change the period type. We can change the ordinate level and so on. All of this as interactive analysis on your device. Another interesting feature for Android is what we call tasks, or which is essentially to-do lists, which are tailored to every user. So the idea here is that you can treat certain objects in DHIS2 as tasks or to-do items. And those include what you call scheduled tracker events. So if an event is scheduled for tracker, that will show up as a task. We can now, as you know, assign users to events, so that particular events which are assigned to the user will show up in your to-do list. And also dataset forms which have expiration date or a period which is about to expire will also show up as a task, meaning you will inform the user that this is something you need to act on. You need to enter data for this particular data set. This is an event that's been scheduled or assigned to you. You need to act. So this is basically a way to create a custom to-do list for every user of the Android application, and then basically inform the user about what he or she has to do today or tomorrow or in the following week. We have this calendar view where you can basically then scroll down and see those tasks by date, so that it's easy to get an overview of what you have to do this particular week. And we think this is going to be tremendously helpful for things like community health workers who have particular tasks to be done for the next week and so forth. Yeah. We also spent a lot of time working on the QR code support in the Android application. And QR codes are now what we call a first-class citizen of the Android application. A QR code is now what we call a rendering type for attributes and data elements. And as all of you know, a QR code is just a visual representation of a textual code, right, which is encoded in a QR code. So now you can actually set any data elements, typically of type text, to have rendering type QR codes. And that means it will automatically then display as a QR code on the device. When you enter a data element in a form of type QR code that doesn't have a value, the application will now automatically open the camera to allow you to capture a QR code. This can be tremendously helpful for things like logistics, where every piece of logistics or commodity has a corresponding QR code, and then you can just easily open your phone and capture that one to get the ID of the entity. For existing QR codes, then we don't open the camera. You can just basically, we're just going to open the QR code and allow you to look at it. We also added a button to then quickly allow you to recapture a new QR code if that's what you're trying to do. We also made it easy now to share QR codes between devices. So if you need to share a QR code value between two different devices, we can now use the built-in sharing of the phone, which then depends a little bit on the operating system and whatever app you have installed. But you can then envision that you can share QR codes using WhatsApp, Messenger, even email between different devices. The other way to do it is, of course, that you just scan the other device with your own phone, or even print the QR code to a printer. And again, we think this can be really, really helpful for use cases like logistics, or even in those cases where you print out like a patient card that a patient can carry with them. And when they come back to the clinic, you can easily then scan the QR code and identify the person just from the QR code. All right, and maps is another one that we worked a lot on. So we have a very interesting maps feature now in the Android application. What we've added recently is native integration with Google Maps, so that when you need to kind of find let's say a household, or need to find a warehouse or a health clinic, you can now use the integrated Google Maps navigation within Android, so that if you're trying to target like a household that has a coordinate, if you're trying to find a health facility that has a coordinate, or even a track entity, then you can just enable Google navigation from within the app without having to go out of the app, copy the address of the coordinate, and then do something that's outside the app. This can be done now within the Android application. We allow you to send to the current position, and we also allow you to now to add enrollment, track entity instance coordinates, and also the elements with the geospatial data type straight to the map, so you can browse it, see it, and also use it in navigation. All right, so that was a lot of stuff in 45 minutes. And with that, I think I'll pause and hand it over to Bisoya and hear if there's any questions.
Yeah, no, we already have questions lined up for you, and thank you so very much, Lars. It looks like you took us all to a sweet shop and just said, oh, what do you want? So the question I would like to start with is, most people on here are probably already having their instance. They already have their instance set up. Maybe there will be a few that are going to start from scratch, and this is kind of ground zero for them. But for those who already have an instance set up, what do you anticipate would be the point of departure in terms of upgrades? Like, is this a major upgrade effort to be able to get all these features, or are we looking at something not so critical?
Yeah, that's a good question. And what I can say is we have made a lot of improvements in the way upgrades are being handled in DHIS2. We're using a new framework in the backend that allows us to have much more control over the database piece of the upgrade. And what that means is that there shouldn't really be a need to do anything. We're trying to remain backwards compatible. We have way less API changes and so on and so on. And so in the ideal world, there's actually not going to be anything you need to do beyond, of course, testing your database properly, your system properly before you upgrade on a test server. We don't recommend you to upgrade on a prod server. You should always go through a test server and make sure that everything works. But there's no radical data model changes in the later versions. And so upgrading should, in theory, be a painless exercise.
And when you say that you're still holding on to at least if you're within the last 3 updates, right? You're not saying, for everyone from 2.19 or 2.20, because there had been some radical data model changes since sort of 29, right? Okay. So we have some questions and actually some dialogue on the MFL layer that you showed. So is this dynamic? Would you be able to sort of track the changes to an organic profile over time using the MFL layer?
Yeah.
And that question was from Sarah Sell. Yeah.
Right. And are we talking about historical changes in the data values for that particular organite, I assume?
Yes, historical changes in the data value and also the profile. So let's say an org unit from a health post became um, a child health hospital, for instance, or maternal clinic. Would it be able to reflect the change when that happened in the profile?
Right. So we actually don't have support at that level. We do have audits for every change that happens, of course, in the system, but we don't really expose those audit logs in the user interface in a meaningful way. Those are really meant for compliance and like audits that might happen and that requires you to go to the backend and pull out log files. So I think we can talk more about that requirement if there's a particular requirement to capture everything. We do, of course, store audit values for data values that change, right, or events. But changes to things like group memberships, custom attributes, fixed properties, we don't really track that in a meaningful way from within the profile. But that is something that definitely can be built. And again, the philosophy we have is always to build, the minimal product first, release it, and then get feedback. So we're definitely listening to more feedback on this one. So I welcome more discussions and debates about these particular features.
Okay, and I know Scott is also replying to some of these questions, but it would be good to get your take on it. So Monica Lopez is asking how QR codes are captured and displayed in DHIS2.
Yes, great question. So we have put a lot of effort into the QR codes, particularly on Android. Again, there's nothing particular special about the way we do it. We do store it as, we store the underlying code as plain text in the database. There's nothing particular. We store the plain text in the database. And then we use a library for Android to essentially encode and decode into a QR code. And so that means we can capture a QR code with your phone. You can display it within Android. You can then exchange it in normal ways. I can't remember exactly the name of the library we're using, but we can dig up the details. And I'm also, again, this is also functionality that we're looking to expand as part of the logistics effort and so on. So we're very much looking for feedback here on how things can be made better.
Yeah, no, that's great. And now you spoke about the org unit indicators, right? And how you could use sort of the data values registered against those org units in analytics. Would this apply to both sort of tracker and aggregate data values, or are we just looking at tracker at aggregate to start with?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we are looking at aggregate to start with. We're going to start there and have that in the kind of the first iteration. But of course, the presence of events will also be very interesting to include. So that's definitely something we're looking into. So we're definitely keeping the door open for that, I would say.
Okay. Now, this question is really going to the process of feature, and I know you have sort of a very healthy backlog already for features. Can you maybe, for the community of practice, how vital is the voting process on getting the feature request? Because if implementations require some features, maybe they're in the backlog, maybe they're not, and you get lots of vote. I mean, how are decisions actually made, or is it just being friends with key people on the development team?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and we didn't talk a lot about process in this presentation. And the process isn't straightforward. It's fairly complex, but I can say that we have different channels for roadmap inputs and feedback. And those span from like the HISP groups and the HISP network who come up with their internal prioritization. So these countries and groups will then prioritize internally within each product and then provide that prioritized roadmap feedback back to the core developer team. But you also have other channels, like you said, Jira. We're looking at prioritization in Jira. So if you upvote something in Jira, that will definitely go a long way. And we also have, when there's not a pandemic, we also have these academies where people can go and vote and tell us their feedbacks. There's a symposium, and there's this event right here. So there's also different ways to get in touch with the core team. The community of practice is another one where you can raise your requests, your features, and your priorities, and so forth. And we're definitely trying to have a broad view and see what the community wants in those channels.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now, one of the sort of barriers to upgrading for most of the very large implementation is just the sheer cost of the documentation that's required, the training that's required. Are the developers, the core developers, are they looking at all at ways beyond the release notes of supporting that effort with Delta documentation around that can be easily used or repurposed for upgrade purposes and for end user? Maybe this is more on the training and development side, but I feel it might go a long way if there was something that could be customized. Is this something that the core developers are looking at in terms of support?
Yeah, that's a good question. And what I can say is that we don't really do that explicitly right now. What we do is that we release, of course, upgrade notes and release notes, which explain in detail what the new features are. And the upgrade notes will explain what potential changes are and what you need to do in terms of the upgrade. So for that one, I feel we have a good grip on. When it comes to like the documentation, I know this can be a big lift to kind of update your docs and so on. The challenge is, of course, that a lot of documentation is specific to the particular instance, right? Because you would like to tailor it with your own forms, your own dashboards and reports. So it's a bit hard to create generic content in that way. But it's an interesting idea, and I think we can definitely talk more about this and see how we can help there. And I know that it can sometimes be a burden in terms of retraining your staff and people, and also updating the docs.
Yeah, and now this is kind of more in terms of the role that DHIS2 is playing a lot more with national implementation, especially with COVID-19. And in sort of the past, there has been a lot of emphasis and highlight on the interoperability, integration tools within features within DHIS2 through its API. And with COVID-19 and the sort of imperative to be able to speak with other systems, do you feel like going forward, there would be more of a plug and play support for some of the other common tools that are found in the field? Or do you think that this is just really more of an implementation, responsibility, the implementer's responsibility?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think this is almost like its own session, so we could talk a long time about this. And what I can say is that I think there's definitely a place for like custom kind of pre-built connectors that connect the typical software out there. And I think we're going to hear more about this later today, actually, in other sessions. But I think what we also see, especially in the countries, in the HMIS world, is that there's a lot of custom and special use cases, special needs, special corner cases, and so on to handle. And we saw this very clearly now with COVID-19, that there was an imminent need for integration with things like COVID certificate systems, the ability to kind of produce safe and secure COVID vaccine certificates based on a vaccination being registered in DHIS2. We had a conversation with COVAX, initiative that is, I think it was an Indian effort to produce a generic system. It turned out to be very difficult to transfer to other countries, and we have seen a lot of custom solutions out there, custom integrations that require coding and so on to work. And so while plug and play is kind of the ideal place we want to go, it remains hard, I would say, to do this in practice. And I think very often you need to go into code. And I think that what we need to produce more as a community, beyond standard connectors for things like ComCare and DHIS2 and ODK and DHIS2, I think we need to talk more about integration patterns, document and advice on what kind of patterns to use, in terms of what makes sense for a particular use case. When do you want to do aggregate to aggregate? When do you want to do tracker to aggregate? When do you want to do event-based, queue messaging patterns and so on? And then let people do implementations of this on their own, using their own custom code. Because I think that getting to a place where everything is just turnkey is going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lars. Now, we see that there is quite a lot of emphasis put on tracker implementation, optimization, and performance. And with lots more people actually using the tracker for personally identifiable information, Can you speak to sort of the security protocols within DHIS2 for those who might still be slightly, on the fence or on the edge of a decision about how robust that is?
Yeah, excellent question. And again, very big topic. And so what I can say is that over the last 2 years, we made a lot of progress in terms of making DHIS2 more secure. We have a dedicated security engineer in the backend team who has done a tremendous job on making the whole system more secure. We had a much more focus on it across the team to make sure the system is secure. We're fixing issues. We're getting a lot of these audits, pen tests from different organizations, which we are very thankful for. It's been very helpful for us to kind of close issues and improve the software. We also been introducing better process. So now, as some of you know, we have this process for how we disclose and release security vulnerabilities. So we have now a more responsible way of disclosing features using CVE. We also have a way now to what we call embargo security releases, patches, so that we cannot infer from the source code what security improvements have been made. We're also in the process of hiring like a lead security person on the core team, who is hopefully going to be able to help us define more guidance, more write-ups, recommendations to the countries, organizations on how to set up Tracker in a secure way. So security is a very big topic for us now and something we spend a lot of energy on.
Yeah, no, great. We always get more questions closer to the end. It's like people realize that the time is running out. So we have 2 questions, and I hope you can fill these in sort of like a minute or so. First is from Nicola around some discussions on the donor panel on standardized metadata packages.
Yeah.
Now, what is the University of Oslo's view of the next sort of standard packages to be developed? Do you have insight into that?
Oh, yes. I don't know exactly the roadmap there, unfortunately. I cannot check. We have a good website for this. So if you go to the DHIS2 website and you look for the packages page on that side, you will see exactly which one is being developed. But my understanding is that we're still working on TB, HIV, and immunization. The COVID package is of course still being adjusted. We're also working on more like lightweight packages for things like medical classifications like ICD-10 and so on. So there's a lot cooking there in the packages team. We have an entire team working on packages now. So this is another sort of large focus area for us. But I do have to refer to the website for what exact packages are being developed.
You might be able to squeeze this one in from Situm Beko. Are there any thoughts around maintenance tasks that can restore soft deleted tracker or aggregate based data? I think this is kind of free support. Why not if not?
Yeah, restoring soft deleted values. That is a very particular question. I think we need to discuss that one offline. That requires more time, more thinking. Yeah.
So no, but thank you so very much, Lars, for your presentation today. I think you've got many of us very excited about the features to be coming in the next few releases.